Alrighty, in this video we're looking at jurisdiction, right? Now jurisdiction, the Latin definition is to determine / speak law. Juris being law, diction, I assume, dictionary, to speak. So it's the lawful power of a state to declare and enforce the rights and duties and control the conduct of natural and judicial persons. That's the source for that there. I'm pretty sure that's a textbook. There's three types of jurisdictions: jurisdiction to prescribe, or else to make your own laws, as long as they don't violate international laws. So for example, you can't make a law that says, by the time you're 16, you have to be tortured and your race will be wiped out, because that's a violation of Just Kogan's. Jurisdiction to enforce, so have your own police, and jurisdiction to adjudicate, or judge based on your own prescribed law. Ius excludendi alios. We look at immunities. These two topics kind of relate to each other. Is the duty of non-interventions. So basically, if New Zealand tries to get involved in an Australian case, then Australia can be like, whoa, back off, buddy. So Lotus case says here, the first and foremost restriction imposed by international law upon a state is that failing the existence of a permissive rule to the contrary, it may not exercise the power in any form in the territory of another state, right? So fairly straightforward. New Zealand can't look at a criminal who committed a crime in Australia and who's being tried under Australian law and be like, whoa, we want in on that. That's not really how it works. Unless there's foreign elements, which we'll look at in a second. So grounds for jurisdiction generally include territoriality, nationality, the principle of protection, and the principle of universality. So territoriality, so all these first two have a few subcategories as well. So territoriality is basically if it happened in Australia, Australia can claim jurisdiction. If it's a transnational crime, so a crime that occurred in two or more places, then there are two types of territoriality. The first is objective, which is when the offence is completed in a territory, and subjective, which is when it started in, a territory. So subjective territoriality is useful for things like cybercrime, right? This guy was hacking softwares over in Belgium, but he was in Australia, so therefore Australia can prosecute him. So nationality is the idea that I am an Australian citizen, right? Someone else might be a Belgian citizen or whatever. And states can decide for themselves what the criteria for nationality is. So I think in America you have to be living there for 10 years. I think in Australia you have to be living there for 5 years, 7 years, who knows, whatever. But the rules can be determined for each state. And the two ideas of nationality, the two branches, are active nationality and passive nationality. So active nationality is when the offender comes from my country, so I prosecute him. Passive nationality is when the victim is from my country, so I prosecute the offender. So active nationality is kind of easier to see. Passive nationality, not so much. There's the Lockerbie incident right here helps to explain this a little bit. So the Lockerbie incident was, there was a flight going from England to Detroit, and then while they were flying, they were flying over Scotland, and then a group of Iranians blew up the plane, and there were a whole bunch of US citizens on board who died. So if you look at here, Scotland has objective territoriality. Oh yeah, and the plane parts fell and killed some people on the bottom as well. So because the crime was finished in Scotland, they've got objective territoriality. Malta is where the bomb was detonated from, and so they had subjective territoriality. Libya had active personality because the perpetrators were Libyan. America and the UK including Scotland, had passive personality because the victims were from America and the UK. So we haven't looked at protective jurisdiction yet. We'll look at that right now. But yeah, that's sort of how it all plays out. Protective jurisdiction is the idea that I can claim jurisdiction if someone else in another country is doing something to threaten my own land, right? So if you're committing espionage against the Australian government in New Zealand, then the Australian government can intervene and be like, whoa, stop doing that. Or if you're counterfeiting, or if you commit treason or attacking a diplomat or whatever. Universal jurisdiction is basically this individual is so dangerous that any state who sees him first can claim him and prosecute him on sight. It arose from, this damn mouse is not the greatest thing of all time, but anyway. It arose out of piracy, right? So if you saw a pirate that was from England, but you're in France, then you could just prosecute the pirate in your own country anyway. that's sort of the idea. And Article 146 outlines what it is. To search for persons alleged to have committed or to have ordered to be committed such grave breaches. So the breaches, things like killing, grievous bodily harm, serious bodily harm, torture or excessive destruction of property, etc., etc. Just Kogan's, all that sort of stuff. You can prosecute them on site. Concurrent jurisdiction is when multiple countries could claim jurisdiction. They generally negotiate how it's going to go down, but usually the strongest linked state claims jurisdiction. That's right. So all these have sort of ranks. I can't remember exactly what they are in order of priority. I definitely know that the active nationality has greater power over passive nationality. So in the Lockerbie incident, it ended up being a case that the UK and the US, the FBI, worked together on. They apprehended the Libyan criminals and they were tried in a court in The Hague under Scottish law. Right. So from what I can understand, they all sort of negotiated a deal about how things were going to run. And because Scotland being the UK, I should mention that, had objective territoriality, they got to claim jurisdiction. And they also had protective jurisdiction and passive personality. So that's a stronger link than pretty much anyone else here. So they would have had a greater right to jurisdiction. One more thing I should mention, statehood. The UK is a state. England is not a state. Ireland, Scotland and Wales individually are not a state because they cannot enter into legal relations. So just so you know. So how do we claim land? Well, there's 5 ways of doing this. The first is buying land, right? So the US bought Alaska from Russia in 1867. So it requires respect for indigenous people and the rights of third states. Pretty straightforward. That's why it's like when you look at Trump and he wants to buy Greenland, they can do that because Greenland is owned by, I don't know, Norway, Finland, some country like that. Accretion, which is when natural land forms, right? So let's say tectonic plates shift and all of a sudden a new verge of land comes. That island can be claimed. There's more to this, sorry, but I'll mention that after I finish this. Terra nullius, when land is empty, a state can go over there, claim the land, control the land, prove that they can do that, and prove that they want the land, and then they can claim it as their own. And this is rare as most of the world is discovered, but it was famously the rationale that was used to claim Australia. Occupation, how long is it? 7 minutes, that's how long this video is going for. Occupation through prescription, it's where you've sort of taken over land implicitly, right? So let's say, how would you describe this? Let's say New Zealand starts to come and they start to sort of, cultivate Australian land, and Australia don't really mind, and New Zealand starts to, let's say they go to Tasmania and they start to grow crops in Tasmania, and Australia sort of don't really do anything. And then New Zealand, grow wheat, and then they establish sort of their own law and their own customs there, and Australia kind of doesn't really do anything. And then New Zealand, I don't really know what else, starts to claim the land as their own. It sort of starts to say, yeah, we own this land, and Australia doesn't really do anything. And this goes on for a long enough time, then New Zealand have just claimed Tasmania. This is hard to prove because it relies on implied consent. So basically, because Australia didn't object, New Zealand gets to take over. That's occupation through prescription. It's controversial, and it must be given over peacefully. And Australia, in our case, would never object if occupation through prescription was to be enforced. Belligerent occupation or conquest. So Australia invades New Zealand and takes over. Hooray! New Zealand is now a state in Australia. This is not a thing. It doesn't exist anymore since 1945. So if Australia was to take over New Zealand, then New Zealand would still have their sovereignty and legal title. And these can't be stolen under the UN Charter. What was I going to say? Accretion? That's right. So, fun fact, where did I drop it? Yeah, here we go. A country's land includes its actual boundaries, so its borders, and 12 nautical miles of surrounding sea and airspace. So what this means is, I'm pretty sure if an island were to form through accretion, within 12 miles, then the state would be able to claim that island. So there we go. Oh yeah, some other things. I should have mentioned this in the last video. All states are sovereign, though sovereignty does not mean it's a state. A country isn't by definition sovereign. Yeah, that's what I was saying before. Yeah, so I don't need to go over that. Alright, that's it. That's our video on jurisdiction. Thank you for watching.